That whole thing, build it and they will come. You can build a lot and they won't come. They need to know about it. They need to know why it's so great and why it's so valuable to them.
The reality of building a SaaS company is tough. In fact, only 1 in 200 make it.
The hugest success already of Flow was the fact that I was able to build it at all. It was then.
The ability to access information has never been easier, but also incredibly overwhelming. Where do I go? What do I do?
Start with talking to customers, potential customers, other people building things like you, people who work in the industry you're trying to sell to, pitch around, this is the problem I'm solving. Is it a problem for you? How do you solve it today? How would you like to solve it better? That is the space, is where I would recommend you start.
Welcome to the podcast and welcome, Sarah. I will introduce Sarah in a moment. I'm genuinely excited about this conversation because the reality of building a SaaS company is tough. In fact, only 1 in 200 make it. Before you started yours, my guest, Sarah, was in corporate life for 20 years at IBM. And this story today that we're going to talk about is a perfect counter narrative to the ideas that spread like wildfire on social media. It's the truth. Founders, you will absolutely love this conversation. Sarah is somebody that I find genuinely inspiring, courageous, and someone who can show you that whatever your idea is, however challenging it might seem, go for it. We've only got one life. You can do it. There is always a way. When there is a will, there is a way. So Sarah, as we discussed when we first spoke, you built fflow to do something for yourself and to escape the limitations of the corporate world. Sarah shared what will now become one of my favorite sayings. 90% of businesses fail, but 90% of founders don't. You built fflow to create something useful, to chart your own path, and to escape the limitations of the corporate world. Success is all about freedom, not just revenue. How did building this redefine what winning means to you as a very technical, super intelligent founder?
I was really fighting in the corporate world. And to my astonishment, a lot of the battles I had were around being able to actually do what I wanted to do, which was I was a senior software developer and I wanted to write code. It still amazes me that I had to leave to corporate in order to write code. So I was having a lot of challenges where either people weren't assigning me any work at all, or what they were assigning me was like side projects or admin or, this old legacy thing that we're not very excited by. And I was like, after this has happened in a few different roles and a few different places, you start to wonder, well, maybe I'm just not very good. And maybe that's why people don't want to assign me the dev tasks. So for me, the hugest success already of Flow was the fact that I was able to build it at all. The code's all mine. Apart from I've had some interns, but I did the code reviews. So basically, if anything doesn't work, it's all on me. And I was able to build it and just thinking, hey, it never was me, it was then.
So when you mentioned being forced into founding and you touched on the fact that you weren't able to really work on the stuff you wanted to work on, what was kind of the turning point? When did you decide you'd had enough and you wanted to build something on your own?
It came gradually. I had already the idea for what I wanted to build before I left IBM. Then I started building a couple of years later, but at the time it was a side project. I was still doing consulting work. I still had a job. So there was quite a long time where I was like poking at it and like, is this going to go somewhere? Am I going to do this? Can I make this work? Yeah, I still don't know.
What convinced you to kind of decide what decided for you that putting more time and money and effort into it was worthwhile?
The freedom to be myself, to choose my own tech stack, to do a load of give back, to do all the side things.
So you felt free,
Yeah, I do.
and you still do?
I still do.
Good. Well, just diving in, and I'll ask Sarah plenty of questions about the sort of side hustle side of things and her feeling on that, having been doing it for quite a long time and really knowing the ups and downs of it all. But one of the great things Sarah did from the outset was, if you don't mind me saying, Sarah, you looked at the agency world and saw a genuine problem, great software, but none of it talked to one another. It was all over the place, and building Flow as a sort of minimal, clean, central reporting core to it all that sounds like a huge architectural win. You solved a complex problem, creating a clean sort of central layer for agencies. So, as a technical person, if you don't mind me asking, what do you think the single most important architectural principle you applied was to make it useful by design?
So it's the approach I've always wanted to take, and which was a challenge for me in some contexts, which is do stuff the simplest way possible, right? Do it, start from the simplest possible solution, and it's led people to underestimate my understanding of the problem when I always start from, right, well, let's just do the simplest thing we can. It's like, "You haven't understood the complexities." Well, I know there are complexities, but let's not engineer for them until we know we need that engineering. So it's start from the really straightforward problems and do the simplest solution you've got. And I worked with a really great UX researcher at one point who pointed out that one of the things we could do was common up some calendars, and it's worked brilliantly. And so, yeah, so as simple as possible, but at the same time, everything's collaborative. Everything you can get into access to all the bits of information. And if you're in a different part of the tool, we might reflect it differently. There might be different styling around it, a different way that we've laid out the information. But ultimately, it's the same data in the same database. So everyone's got the same context for what they're looking at.
In order to develop those different pathways, looking at reporting from a different perspective that you touched on there, how did you arrive at the thinking using your concept the simplest way possible to reflect those changes in the different ways that you can look at the data?
So the reason everyone has different tools is they typically go with different departments, or let's say different roles. So you've got a project manager, you've got a finance team, you've got the consultants who are doing the work. They're all going to have very different ideas of what information they need and what it should look like, because they're coming from a trying to do different tasks, wearing different hats. So it was about thinking through from the point of view of each, and still is, by the way. I don't claim I've cracked all of this yet, but the goal is to understand the viewpoint of the people using the tool, and that they would have a different viewpoint, and therefore they need a different style of information.
You mentioned the finance, the project manager, etc. Who is the sort of main user of this in particular? Where are the main problems that you saw when you were really diving into
Um,
this?
I've got two different answers to that. So one is it's the project manager, isn't it? Because that's where all the projects coalesce. And so the project manager is the person who's kind of fighting all the fires and trying to see across multiple projects. Usually it might, I'd say project manager might be the COO in some organizations. It's that kind of broad cross project view that is at the heart. But also the other part of that answer that is, because we're selling a little bit something to everyone, it's a massive sales problem. I think I've got a handle on some of the architectural parts of the solution, but I'm absolutely still working on the sales challenges that come with it when you're trying to sell to
It,
everyone in the organization at once.
it is hard for people to imagine a single place where they can get all the information they need, whether they're finance, project, account management, whatever. It's difficult, but it's also hugely beneficial because everybody's on the same page, right? That's the goal. You're a really great example, in my mind, of a true founder journey you are building whilst consulting and working. And this is a common story I come across. So, my question for you is for the founder who's listening, or the aspiring founder who hasn't even started yet, but has a great idea, and they might be scared to quit their quote unquote stable job or start something alongside it, what is one, to use the phrase, practical rule you could give them for working out whether they should do it, managing their time and energy? How did you manage your time and your energy around, balancing two things at the same time? And I guess, given your own experiences, what recommendation would you make to that aspiring founder or new founder who's struggling to find that balance? What have you learned on how to do that?
I was looking for designers to help. I was looking for sales help, business help. I didn't find any of it. I live in a fairly rural part of the UK. I'm not in London. I didn't have access to a lot of the help that I was looking for. And I was like, well, okay, I'm stuck on a lot of fronts, but I'm a developer and I know how to build things. So I started building. That was my comfort zone. It still is my comfort zone. It's where I go if I'm like not sure what I want to do with my day. I know how to do that bit. That is absolutely and categorically not the advice I would give anyone else. And it's also we're gonna come to I'm looking at a pivot at the moment, and I am gonna do it differently for the pivot, so I'm gonna take my own advice as well. Do what I'm planning, not what I did, because it doesn't work. That whole thing, build it and they will come, you can build a lot and they won't come. They need to know about it. They need to know why it's so great and why it's so valuable to them. Yeah, so there was what I did, and then there's what I would do now. I don't have kids. If you've got a family, it's much harder to make that side time. So I don't have kids. I was able to manage my work so that I have time in the day to do extra things. The advice I'm going to give, well, what should work for you even a bit if you've still got commitments, because it's not a big time commitment necessarily. It's go to networking events. And I say this as someone who hates networking events and hates going out and socializing with people. But if you want a business, at some point you're going to have to go out and start talking about it. And what a lot of people feel more comfortable with, and that absolutely includes me, is you build it first and then you can go and take this thing and show it to people when you talk to them about it. And actually, that's not what I would do if I was starting over, because when you talk to people, you generally just have your hands to wave, right? You don't tend to take your laptop and show them a demo of this wonderful shiny software. You might send them a link to it, maybe. But you know what? If all you send them a link to is a landing page, which is give me your email address and sign up if you're interested, that's plenty to get started with. So the advice would, especially if you're short on time, even more if you're short on time. And even if, like me, you have the skills to build yourself, because if you need to hire to build, that might put you off as well. But even if you've got the skills to start building, don't start there. Start with talking to customers, potential customers, other people building things like you, people who work in the industry you're trying to sell to. Go out and do those networking, have those conversations, and just try your pitch around this is the problem I'm solving. Is it a problem for you? How do you solve it today? How would you like to solve it better? That is the space is where I would recommend you start. It's not where I started.
What you're suggesting, if I understand correctly, is work out what problem you think you're trying to solve, go and talk to the people who you think have it, find out whether it really is the problem they're trying to solve, and give them an opportunity to show interest in that particular thing. Have those conversations before you dive into the code, whether you are the technical person. I, like you, love diving into creating things. It's fun. But the analogy I always use is it's better to find out from a couple of people that you may be approaching the problem in the wrong way before you put your heart and soul into building that thing than it is to find out that you're completely on the wrong track. If networking isn't your bag, I'm just going to add this point, if I may, Sarah, that if you think you have a great idea, you could always share it on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever, and just be honest about it. And say, I've got this particular idea. I'm looking at helping A, B, and C. This is the problem I think they're having. I'd love to talk to 5, 10 of these people. If you could please share or drop me a direct message, and we could arrange a 15-minute chat. It can give you a lot of information. And if that seems too scary, one other thing that you can do is go on Reddit or various forums and see what people are complaining about as problems they're having. There's always a way, is my point. And Sarah's absolutely right. Try and have those conversations early so that you can, especially if you have kids. I don't have kids either, but especially if you have a lot to juggle, it can give you that little bit of clarity. You don't have said that. You mentioned when we spoke about how personal resilience changed your perspective. How did facing major life events create the clarity and focus you needed to transition from that secure corporate role to do a more free, but in also many ways, a more challenging mission-driven path?
There were so many things I was scared of, mostly around people, talking to people, going out networking. It's scary going out and exposing your ideas before you've properly finished them. Feels like people might be quite critical. There's the self critic in your brain anyway all the time, but you get scared that that's all the feedback you're going to get. So it was like, yeah, I'm scared, but I'm going to do this anyway. I think that was how I changed. And it wasn't less scared. I was just, it's not a good enough reason to not do the things you really want to do.
So did it, going through the challenges you've gone through, did that give you greater clarity? And the reason I ask that is because me personally, I've a lot of people who know me know that the last 5, 6 years have been a very interesting journey alongside business, with ulcerative colitis and surgery and all these other things. It's not been easy, but I know that for me, it gave me clarity. Did it give you any clarity in particular? You talked about, effectively fear isn't isn't a reason not to do it. Was there any sort of clarity that you got going through that journey that maybe you didn't have before?
The clarity point for me came when I realized, because one of the things when you work for yourself, once I quit the corporate world, as it were, and had full time, is you can do side things, right? You don't have to just do the project. You can do stuff. I'm involved in some dev communities. I get involved in women in STEM activities. And there's loads of things I was doing. And I was like, they're all a bit different. I wasn't spotting the theme. And then I did spot the theme. And that was the moment of clarity, which is the theme's inclusivity. So particularly that's most obvious when I think about IT. I mean, traditionally people like a comp sci degree for IT, but there's actually no reason. I know plenty of really strong developers who don't have a comp sci degree. My own degree is engineering, but I actually even know some who came through boot camps or even self-taught. It's perfectly possible to be a really good developer without doing a comp sci degree. And that means it should be a route for social mobility, right? Anyone should be able to break into this industry. It's not like law or medicine where you've absolutely got to have the degree route. And so it should be accessible to lots of people. And in the UK, we're not doing quite well enough at encouraging different routes into careers. And so that was one of the things that I started realizing actually almost everything I do is around inclusivity and encouraging people to think in lots of ways about their opportunities without being limited by where they come from or where they started.
When you say inclusivity and getting into coding, what do you think could be done to make it better?
There's a really important thing I think should be doing, but that's another problem. That's problem two. But problem one is we should be trying at least. Right. Teenagers nowadays, they're never off their phones, right? They're on them all the time. They're gaming, they're doing social media, they're doing this, that, and the other. And somehow they don't seem to make the connection that this is a potential career and potentially a career they might love. If they're really enjoying the gaming and the social media, it's like, oh, yeah, they might think about a career as an influencer, but they don't think about, hey, there's this whole set of technologies that are enabling and empowering people to play games and make social media posts. And building them can be fun as well, right? Not everyone maybe has the right extroversion to be an influencer. I don't know. I'm not sure I'm one of them. But everyone can play some part somewhere in that infrastructure. And kids today, teenagers, really don't think about that possibility. And somehow we are not educating them that A, it's possible, B, it's fun, C, it's interesting.
I think that just touching on your point about how people are glued to phones for the most part, whatever they're doing on their gaming, social media, etc., etc. I don't necessarily have the answer, but I do think that you're right in the sense that all people see by default are the extroverts on social media, the influencers, etc. Because by virtue of them putting themselves out there, which takes a lot of courage, bravery, etc. But for the people who aren't necessarily the most outgoing or extrovert, I do highly recommend, you touched on boot camps. Years ago, there was one called, and I don't have it in front of me right now, but there's one called Treehouse, maybe. There are lots of ways to get into being a technical. Sarah's a great example of a technical founder. She's very, very, very technically aware, knowledgeable. She can build things. She's got an incredible brain. And if you too are that way inclined, I'm sure that there are loads of, whether it be on YouTube, however you learn, because I think I learned more as I got older that I didn't do so well reading textbook after textbook. So yeah, if you're listening and you're thinking about it, Sarah is a real example of an inspiration. And if I can follow on from your point about inclusivity, please do tell the audience about your own journey as a female and the challenges associated with that going into STEM.
Yeah. So it was partly because of where I lived. I had an international childhood and I was at international schools in several places. And when I was 16, I was at school in Switzerland. And my international school there, their big thing was languages and social sciences. And from my point of view, they just weren't enough interested in maths. To the point that so at 16, I did the UK exams, and then I was going to go on at 18 and do the International Baccalaureate, which, by the way, if you're an all-rounder, is an amazing exam because it's 6 different subjects and an extended essay, and if you're either not sure what you want or you want to keep all your avenues open, it's a great opportunity, the IB, but I just looked at it and went, essays, 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 more essays, tiny bit of maths, and there is in the IB, there's an advanced maths option, but my school didn't have it. So I lobbied my parents and I ended up coming to boarding school so that I could study double maths, physics, and then they arm twisted me on economics, which is so I just did one essay subject. And I was like, I like to tell this story because there's a head teacher somewhere in the UK going around saying girls don't like maths and physics. It's not true. It's cultural. Some girls love maths and physics.
Since we're in the interest of fixing all these problems, let's imagine we're talking to the headmaster for a second. I know the audience here is very much founders, but as in all aspects of life, having diversity and inclusivity and different perspectives, different approaches, different ways of thinking can only benefit everyone. What would you suggest to somebody who perhaps doesn't feel that they maybe had the access to those sorts of subjects and maybe what they could do? Because I don't know that necessarily this audience with ambitious, wannabe founders and founders who are building something, is there anything that they could particularly do to kind of, in the same way that we talked about boot camps and stuff for coding and developing?
There's this sense when you're in school that you've got to get this qualification. You've got to have this grade in this subject to go on and do the next thing in this subject. And then the next step on the path is usually at some point involves a university degree. And there's this real sense of you've got to take this very standardized route. Well, that doesn't work for everyone. Some people, the schools just don't have the opportunity. Other people, they have a miss on an exam grade at some point that seems to be at the time super critical and career ending. And you know what? It really isn't. So I would love schools to embrace more of there are vocational routes to these things. You can do self study. There's so many more opportunities now to catch up for something that you've missed in terms of not in terms of a specific exam, but in terms of the ability to go out and study a subject you're really interested in. Find it in the way that works for your own style, like you were talking about earlier. That might be some people prefer video learning, some people prefer written learning, some people prefer doing interactive exercises. There's all of those are out there. And some of them cost money, but mostly it's an awful lot cheaper than the old formal paths. And some of them are free.
And you can probably build and create and do whatever you want to do, follow your passion whilst you're doing the thing, studying.
Yeah.
Udemy, edX, Skillshare. There's loads of places where you could go online. And if you're a technical founder, and maybe you want to learn a bit more about the marketing and sales side, you could go and look at those, or vice versa. This isn't just something for people at school age. This is every age. The ability to access information has never been easier, but also incredibly overwhelming.
And not just information, but communities as well. So join a community of people who are excited about the things you're excited about. And learn from them because they will know the best resources, right? Or sometimes they are themselves the best resources.
I think the important thing these days, disagree with me if you wish, but I think that business is very much a journey and we constantly learn, develop, and change. And that's important, to never think that you know it all or that you've got it or whatever, because things constantly change. And that's important. The ability to adapt to change in business is essential. I mean, I've been involved personally in 6 companies that I've been associated with, and then tons of others that I've advised. At what point do you, having your own experience, think recognizing changing environments or pivoting, as became the buzzword during COVID, is a necessary thing to do? And for those of you who haven't heard the word pivot, it's a moment for reclarification. What do you think is the key point at recognizing when a pivot is necessary?
So it goes back to when we were talking about networking, go out and talk to people about your ideas. I don't want to make it sound like I didn't do any of that. I did a fair bit. And when I was talking to people about the problem that I was solving with Flow and connecting software that doesn't talk to each other, people would nod. They'd be like, "Yeah, yeah, I get that. That's a problem." But what I missed and what they weren't giving me was, and it's a priority for me to solve it. So it was when I finally was like, yeah, people recognize the problem, but it's not a priority right now. So they're not gonna, it's not even, they're not gonna spend money on it. They're not gonna spend time on it. Agency people are really busy and they have a million things to do and they are not interested in something that's gonna absorb a lot of their time. And they recognize the problem, so they'll nod, but it's a polite nod. It's not a, "Yes, I need this product." So I don't know when I started to realize that there's a question missing, which is not just, "Do you recognize this problem?" Which as was yes, but, "And what do you need it solved? What do you want me to do to solve it? Would you be willing to spend money? What would make your life easier? Would you be willing to invest a little bit of time up front to get more savings later on?" I mean, I don't want to expect, let's keep it simple. I don't expect this tool to create work, but ultimately, when you're installing it right at the beginning, there can be a bit of an element of that. So yes, that'll be my retread at this point. My pivot will be going out and saying, what's the problem that you is burning you, setting you on fire? What do you need solving right now?
In that context, then I think that founders need to do this every 6 months, if not more frequently, because certainly from a technical perspective, I see it all the time where people, if you imagine you're on Route 66, you're on Route 66. Route 66 is a good example of a old way that worked, getting people from A to B, and then the highways came along. And of course, those town cities, everything along Route 66 suffered, and a lot of it is unfortunately died. It's a relic of its former past. And the danger with going down a particular path and not asking questions on a frequent basis is you might miss the highways. Blockbuster, I love it. It's always going to have a place in my heart. But Blockbuster and many others that have disappeared over the last 15, 20 years are great examples of not recognizing that problem. And I'm just talking about consumer stuff, but it applies very much with software.
And there's a related thing, which is because if you're revising your conversations with customers every 6 months, you'd be like, well, look, I'm not rebuilding my whole product every 6 months. No, you're not, but you probably don't need to. What you might be revising is your marketing message, is your landing page, is what's the reason people are coming to your product. But you don't necessarily, it's also the mindset of, yes, I'm going out and I'm talking to my customers again. But what I might be changing most often is the marketing, and less often is the underlying, the work all behind it, right?
As a marketer, I'm naturally going to say that that's completely true, but equally well, you might discover a random thing that everybody keeps talking about and there's no solution to, that could take your product from pretty useful to a must have. It's you just never know where those conversations lead. And as long as you frame it in the particular view that, hey, look, I want to keep making this product better for you, then who would say no to that conversation? Because it could lead to, making your message, your landing page, your ads, whatever, better, but also your product itself a little bit better.
Yeah, you will get those, but I don't think you'll get them every 6 months.
They will
Yeah.
come every once in a while. Thank you very, very much for your time today, Sarah. If I may ask you one final question, if you were given the opportunity to speak in front of a bunch of founders right now who were very early on in their journey, I think I know what you're going to say based on this conversation, but I thought I'd ask anyway. What would you tell them to do to make sure that their energy, their time, their money is well spent on their idea?
Don't spend money on anything until you've checked your options. What alternatives are out there? I recently worked with another founder and was trying to do everything I could to save her money. And I said to her, don't spend money on this, don't spend money on that, don't spend money on that, don't spend money on that. Do spend money on some good quality designs. And I'm like, that was the exception. And that can help you with those conversations and the hand waving just as much as having a whole product. So it's, don't spend money by default, but every now and then there will be something where you do need to spend money, but spend it carefully and look at your options and ask your network, can you get this stuff for free? If you're in founders are really supportive people. They will answer your questions. They will help you out. They'll always be willing to jump on a 20-minute chat. So there will be many ways to get things. So go out and ask before you spend any money, and then just occasionally do spend it.
Okay. So be careful with how you spend your money. Try and find bootstrap solutions to these things and low cost solutions. For people who want to check out Sarah online and Flow and her journey and get to know her, I will pop links into the show notes and to the description. And I want to say a massive thank you for your time today, Sarah.